What if I told you that the legends and myths you've heard about giants, demons, fallen angels, and an evil force manipulating humanity behind the scenes were all true? From ancient texts and artifacts to modern-day supernatural encounters, the evidence points to an ongoing cosmic battle, a spiritual war that has raged throughout human history between the forces of light and an ancient evil determined to corrupt God's creation. Its origins can be traced back to the beginning, to the fall of one of God's most perfect and wise beings, a glorious angel whose pride and desire for worship ultimately led to his rebellion against the Creator himself. Banished from heaven and cut off from God's power and glory, this fallen angel, known as Satan, became a mere shadow of his former self, forced to siphon energy and life force from humanity through trauma, death, and blood sacrifice in his quest to strike back at the Almighty. This is the story of Satan's seed, his efforts to corrupt the human race and rebuild it in his own image through an unholy agenda of genetics and possession spanning millennia, a dark conspiracy that began with creatures spoken of in ancient myths and continues to this very day. Brace yourself as we expose the shocking truth about the spiritual war that has been raging all along, right beneath our eyes. To understand the origins of this cosmic spiritual battle, we must go back to the beginning, before the creation of humanity itself. In the words of the ancient prophet Ezekiel, there was once a being described as the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. This was no ordinary angel, but one of God's most highly exalted servants, empowered with knowledge and radiance beyond comprehension. His name was Halel, which comes from the Akkadian Elil and Sumerian Enlil, meaning Lord Wind, or the Prince of the Power of the Air. It was mistakenly translated as Eosphoros in Greek, and then recorded in some older Bible translations as Lucifer, meaning light bearer, which became a name widely adopted and accepted by the Anglophone world as the true name of Satan. God had placed this glorious being, Enlil, which we shall refer to him as, in the Garden of Eden and charged him as its protector. God then created the first man, Adam, from the dust of the earth, and the first woman, Eve, from Adam's rib, who were unveiled as the crowning glory of the Almighty's work. They were innocent and pure, and enjoyed intimate fellowship with their Maker in the perfection of the Garden of Eden. God also gave dominion of everything he had created to Adam. Enlil then began to harbor a dark secret, a twisted pride that would metastasize into an unquenchable thirst for worship and desire to raise his throne above the very stars of God himself. Rather than be the guardian of Eden and the servant of the beings God had created, he merely needed to slander, to insinuate that what God had said not to do, Adam and Eve could do, and so he would usurp the authority and dominion over the earth that God had placed in the hands of Adam. Eve knew and trusted Enlil, the multi-faced and dragon-like being, as Eden's guardian. He didn't need to come in a disguise. He simply needed to prey on Eve's naivete with his forked tongue of manipulation and lies. He merely needed to convince them to disobey the one command God gave. Satan achieved his goal of stoking mankind's rebellion and severing their connection to the Creator. And once severed, death would ensue, and he would be the default ruler forever. This is when Enlil acquired his new name, more fit for his corrupted nature, Satan, the ancient Hebrew word for adversary. Enlil's rebellion represented the ultimate betrayal against his Creator, and for this he was cast out of God's holy mountain and Eden and stripped of his previous glory. He was no longer plugged into the power source of the Almighty. Enlil lost his glorious fiery aura and became a shriveled husk of his former self. The tragic consequences of Adam and Eve's sin were devastating. They became separated from God, forced to endure suffering, death, and were banished from the paradise of Eden. A once perfect creation had now been tainted by the venom of Enlil's slander and hatred. Yet in that moment of judgment, God issued a decree that would become the prophecy foreshadowing Satan's eventual demise. He declared to the serpent, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." These words contain the first glimpse of hope that one day a descendant of Eve would come and crush the head of that ancient serpent, Satan himself. But until that promised deliverer would appear, the great spiritual war had newly begun. Satan's mission was clear: to corrupt the seed of humanity, to build an empire in rebellion against God's kingdom. Over the centuries that followed, this would take the form of sinister plots, ancient conspiracies, and an unholy agenda to mix and manipulate the bloodlines of God's creation. In the years following humanity's expulsion from Eden, the spiritual war between God and Satan raged in earnest. Satan's first major offensive aimed at corrupting the seed of the human race from the inside out. According to the ancient book of Enoch and other apocryphal texts, Satan did not work alone. He commanded 200 fallen angels who followed him in rebellion against the Creator to carry out a devious plot. These rebel angels took an unholy vow. They would interbreed with human women, polluting the pure genetic stock established by God at creation. From these illicit unions, a race of hybrid offspring would be spawned on the earth, celestial beings of a different spirit. In Genesis 6, these half-human mutant creatures are given a specific name that would become seared into legend and myth, the Nephilim. To an ancient world, they were known as giants, the Nephilim, who roamed the earth, intimidating and wreaking havoc among the sons of men. But their true nature and origin was something far more sinister. You see, the Nephilim were not born with the breath of life and spirit from God implanted within them like the human race before them. No, these were soulless beings, empty biosuits without any higher spark of spiritual consciousness, which made them the perfect host bodies for their very creators, the fallen angels who had rebelled against heaven. In other words, Satan had finally achieved his goal, the creation of incarnate avatars, that his dark angelic forces from the spirit realm could inhabit and exercise physical influence on the earth. It was the ultimate genetic corruption of God's masterpiece. Evidence of Satan's Nephilim conspiracy can even be found embedded in ancient artifacts from cultures across the globe. Take the inscriptions uncovered in the ruins of the cultures like Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, which reference the great gods or beings who descended from the heavens to interbreed with humans. But perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from an inscription discovered at the ancient pagan ritualistic site on Mount Hermon in Syria. Dating back thousands of years, it contains a command issued by none other than Enlil, the god of death himself. But it was revealed through his oldest and most secretive of names, Bod. According to the inscription, Bod commands a group to proceed from the location, a likely reference to the fallen angels who had vowed to corrupt human bloodline by mingling with women. Satan, the adversary of God, had officially launched his conspiracy of hybrid beings, but praise the Lord Almighty, God did not let this abomination go unanswered. As the world became overrun by violence and the spread of these Nephilim creatures, God looked upon the earth with grieving heart. All but one righteous man named Noah and his family had been untainted by the satanic conspiracy. In a cataclysmic act of judgment, but also one of preservation, God sent a great deluge to wipe out every living creature, both man and Nephilim alike. Only Noah's genetics remained pure and true after the flood receded. It was God's reset to purge the earth once and for all of Satan's corrupted seed line, a do-over to regenerate the human race from an uncorrupted lineage. But the adversary was not so easily defeated. Though God had purged the earth of the Nephilim horror through the great flood, Satan was not deterred from his obsession to corrupt the human seed, his endgame was still in play. You see, the adversary of God understood that a messianic bloodline existed through Noah's family, one that promised a descendant who would one day crush the serpent's head, as foretold in Genesis 3:15. If Satan hoped to thwart this prophecy, he would need a new strategy to pollute the human gene pool. Enter the post-Diluvian figure of Nimrod, the infamous mighty hunter who ancient legends say was humankind's first Gibor, or tyrant. Under Satan's direction, Nimrod could become the post-flood counterpart to usher in the Nephilim agent once more. Various ancient sources speak of the contempt and hatred mankind had for Nimrod, of his unnatural physical characteristics like enormous size, superhuman strength, and demonic appearance. Could Nimrod have been an early experiment by the adversary, a human form genetically manipulated to be possessed as a host body for fallen spirits? If so, it paved the way for Satan's overarching plan, the creation of a Nephilim race of possessed beings he could one day use as an army of hybrid mutants to wage war against God's people and the coming seed promised in Eden. This battle that began in the garden is predicted to reach terrifying heights in the future during events foretold in the Bible's book of Revelation. Pay close attention to the mark of the beast that would be required for all humanity. It causes all to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. Revelation 13:16 and 17. What if this famous mark is not just some computer chip or barcode, but a genetic transformation designed to corrupt the bloodlines of those who take it, to make them open vessels ready for demonic possession as foot soldiers in Satan's Nephilim army? The shocking truth is, we may already be witnessing evidence of Satan's handiwork and the deployment of these corrupted hybrids walking among us today. I'm talking about the phenomena of so-called aliens and the global rise of reports involving alien abductions. From respected scholars like Dr. John Mack of Harvard and Dr. David Jacobs of Temple University, who have thoroughly interviewed over 1,000 abductees combined, the inescapable conclusion is that these alien beings are far more likely interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial. The countless testimonies from abductees report not just sightings of strange craft, but physical violations and the extraction of human DNA, almost as if there is an agenda of hybridization at work by these entities who can shift between the spiritual and physical realms. Even more disturbing, many recount these aliens bearing a striking resemblance to the classical demonic descriptions of ancient lore, complete with horns, wings, reptilian features, and overwhelming sensations of malice and trickery, leading both Dr. Mack and Dr. Jacobs to confess their utter revulsion at whatever intelligence is behind the agenda they uncovered. This should come as no surprise when we consider the recent revelations from multiple governments around the world admitting to the existence of UFOs that seem to defy our laws of physics and any known human technology. If these crafts are potentially the work of interdimensional fallen beings entering our realm, might they represent the modern return of Satan's Nephilim hybrids? And if so, could the orchestrator of this latest conspiracy be an end-times incarnation of the Nimrod figure himself? You see, Bible prophecy speaks of a final false Messiah who will one day seize control, a lawless one empowered by Satan, who opposes God and leads the world into apocalyptic devastation before the return of the true Messiah. With blending of man's discoveries in genetics, computing, cybernetics, and whatever knowledge has been reverse engineered from the UFO phenomena, the pieces may already be in place for Satan's ultimate checkmate move against humanity. The spiritual war that has raged across millennia all comes down to this moment in human history. Satan's obsession with corrupting the seed of God's creation appears to be entering its final, most desperate phase. Through a cosmic convergence of technological and genetic advancements, helped along by diabolical interdimensional counterparts, the adversary's endgame could very well involve an unprecedented hybridization initiative to corrupt the DNA and souls of humanity on an unthinkable scale. Consider this ominous verse about the apocalyptic future. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing. 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 and 10. Is this a foreshadowing of how Satan will exploit both trusted science and unholy supernatural forces to pave the way for his Antichrist figure? A figure who will demand the whole world take his genetic mark and pledge total allegiance to his New World system? While the road ahead based on Scripture's prophecies, we must remember God has already proclaimed the final victory. His promise in Genesis that the serpent's head would be crushed reassures us of the devil's eventual demise when Jesus Christ returns to reclaim this world. Until then, the battle rages on as it has for thousands of years since the fateful day in the Garden of Eden. Open your eyes to the spiritual war surrounding us. Resist the great deception by clinging to God's truth. For even now, in these end times, the seed of Satan walks among us, awaiting its false monarch to be unveiled. Stay vigilant. Stay prayerful. The remnant is counting on it.